Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and John Green's novel Turtles All the Way Down. Alright. Okay, so the reason that I'm going to be talking about John Green's novels Turtles All the Way Down is I recently read John Green's Turtles All the Way Down, which is a young adult slice of life novel. Okay? Now, yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. Some people would describe some of John Green's books as romance novels, or that they have a romance element in them. I think that might be true. So why am I reading a young adult slice of life, or even an element of romance in it? Well, the reason why is I'm blessed to have a college-age daughter, and she has read every single one of John Green's novels. And she became a fan of John Green. You know, somebody told her, hey, read this book. She's read them all. Like Paper Towns, Looking for Alaska, Abundance of Catherines, Fault in Our Stars, and Turtles All the Way Down. So Turtles All the Way Down is John Green's 5th young adult slice of life novel. And she loved them all. She said they were fantastic. And so I discussed books with my daughter, and I asked her what she's reading, and then she asked me what I'm reading. And it's really nice to experience a piece of art and then to discuss it with the people you care about. It's really important, right? It's one of the ways that I try to build a bridge to my children. But I will say, sometimes especially when I'm starting a piece of work, when I'm starting a piece of art, where I'm coming to this not because this was my first choice as a piece of art, but because I'm doing this as another task for another reason to accomplish a different goal. Well, one of the things that's really fun is to inject Dungeons & Dragons into that task, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to be experiencing this piece of art. What can I take away from this piece of art? Here's a creator who's clearly smart, and I'll explain why I think John Green's smart in a minute. What did he put in this work that can be ported over into my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game? What elements can I use as a Dungeons & Dragons, as a skilled veteran game master? What can I put into my game, right? And so and so I went about it, knowing that I was going to be, reading this book for one purpose, but then attaching this additional purpose to it, right? So, and I really highly recommend this. Like, if you have a task and you're struggling to get that task rolling, just to get it started, once I got into this book, it was really moving and I loved it. It was really excellent book. I highly recommend reading it for anybody. If you just sort of like a good novel with a good story, compelling characters, it's excellent, right? But any task you have where you need to experience a piece of art, and you need to work your way through a piece of art, and it's challenging, just attach something, attach Dungeons & Dragons to it, and immediately comes better, right? And actually, I really was able to bring out quite a few treasures from this book that port directly into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the story that I encountered within this book, and then I'm going to tell you the parts that lift completely out into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, okay? Alright, so, that's another thing, is John Green really is a very smart creator. Why do I think that? Well, one, my daughter, was reading all of his books, and then she started listening to Hank Green's YouTube channel. Hank Green is John Green's brother, and he does a lot of science-based YouTube channel content. He's absolutely brilliant, right? And I was like, oh, so when I saw that, I thought, wow, maybe John Green is smart too, and his books would be good. Maybe my daughter's not just reading them because one of her friends told her, but they're really good books. And sure enough, they are really good books. So this is Turtles All the Way Down. This is the story that I encountered, and then here's the treasure that I kind of delved out of this work of art that ports directly over into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. All right, so the story is primarily about three people. Asa Holmes, she is a girl who has a crippling fear of getting diseases. Okay, she is a high school student in Indiana, and her father has died, and her mother is raising her. Okay, in current times. So this book takes place contemporary America, right? Actually, it's very contemporary America. Like John Green lists the places she goes, and he's like, oh, she went to Applebee's and she ordered the riblets, right? Like, it's like super contemporary America, right? Okay, Aza has a friend named Daisy. Daisy is a socialite. She is a socialite who writes Star Wars fan fiction. Okay, and so she's very charming. She can easily, win people over. Excuse me. Everyone loves her. That kind of thing. All right. And then finally, there's Davis. Davis is specifically he is Aza's billionaire boyfriend asterisk. Okay, the asterisk is important. All right. So let's get this rolling. So essentially, when the story opens up, we are dealing with Aza and Daisy, and we are introduced to Aza. She has this absolutely crippling a fear of getting sick, getting a disease. She's able to go to school. She's able to function. She doesn't hold down a job or anything like that, but her mom takes care of her, and she's constantly in her own head just worrying about getting this specific disease called C. diff, but she worries about all kinds of diseases and anything viral or bacterial, right? She has all this really a huge amount of anxiety. Her friend Daisy really loves her, non-romantically, and is just her bestest friend, and they get along really well, and they go to Applebee's all the time together. Well, in their high school, there's a boy named Davis, and his name is Pickett, and Davis's father, Pickett, he was recently found missing, okay, and he is a billionaire, right? And but it was found that he had broken a whole bunch of laws, and he was being investigated for tax fraud and a million other things, right? But he disappeared. Well, there is a reward out for his specific for anyone who finds him. It's $100,000. So Aza and Daisy, the two girls, the friends, begin to investigate Pickett's missingness, right? His disappearance. They investigate his disappearance. Okay, so actually, they end up going over to, Davis's as part of their investigation, and Aza ends up talking to Davis, and Davis explains that his father is missing, but he also tells her that if his dad, even when his dad is found, if his dad was killed, right, and that's one of the reasons why he might have disappeared, he and his brother Noah, Davis has a younger brother, a junior high age brother, Noah, will inherit nothing. And the reason why is his father, Pickett, who is now missing, who has disappeared, has given his entire inheritance to this dinosaur lizard called a Natua, right? This is actually a real creature, and a whole bunch of actual billionaires are investigating this creature because they think it contains aspects of longevity, the way turtles live to 150 years old. Well, these lizards live even longer than that, and so there's a lot of research in real life that's being done on these Atua creatures to solve longevity. And also, this is absolutely a theme. There's a whole bunch of being a billionaire and being into longevity in Silicon Valley is like a trope. Everybody's all billionaires are into longevity now, right? Or the majority of them. All right. So basically, at this point, Aza and Davis become an item, and they start trying to be boyfriend and girlfriend. But Davis swiftly learns that her crippling fear of getting these diseases, it makes it super hard to be a boyfriend to her because, he tries to kiss her, right? And she's like, oh my gosh, I have all these, viruses, and, I have all these bacteria, and your bacteria's, oh, that's horrible, right? And so she kind of freaks out about this, and then, and actually, it's just challenging, but they continue to try, and most of their relationship is through text, right? All right. So Davis really falls in love with Aza, and then he says, hey, listen, I want to be boyfriend-girlfriend, but you're in the middle of this investigation. I need you to stop that investigation. And he just gives her $100,000 cash, which she immediately splits with Daisy. Okay, so Aza now gives $50,000 to Daisy, and now Aza and Daisy each have $50,000, right? Cash, right? And so Daisy now buys a car and buys a computer. Now, Daisy is poor. Okay, and Aza is not poor, and she already has a computer and already has a car, right? Also, Aza's car is called Harold. Aza's father is dead, and her car, Harold, is the Toyota Corolla that her father left her. In the trunk of that car is her father's cell phone, which he kept a whole bunch of pictures on, and she would just kind of scroll through these pictures, right? Even though they're backed up on another computer, she really likes to look at them on the phone, right? All right, for whatever reason that is, right? So, so basically, the story keeps moving along, right? And Davis then goes to Aza and says, "Hey, did you read any of?" Davis goes to Aza and says, "Did you read any of Daisy's Star Wars fanfic?" And Aza's like, "No, I didn't." Right? And so it becomes apparent, so she goes over and she actually looks at her friend's fanfic, which she's been writing for like 5 years, and Aza and Daisy are like 10-year-old friends, right? And she finds out that Aza's Star Wars fanfic is huge, like 15,000 people read this thing, right? It's like really big, right? And she realizes that there is a character who is her. I think her name in the story is Izella, right? And basically, she's like this useless person that is just kind of drug along through the story. So Aza gets upset with Daisy, right? And then like kind of, says, I can't believe you made me this useless person in your fanfic. And so Daisy kind of spins her wheels on this, and then the two of them, Aza and Daisy, get in the car together, and I think, and Aza's going to take Daisy, Aza and Daisy are going somewhere in the car together, in Harold, okay? Daisy flips out on Aza, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're calling me out for making this character. And the reason why is being friends with you is the worst, right? We get this $50,000. You judge me for buying a car. You judge me for buying a computer. Things you already have. Your privilege, your privileges are like oxygen to you. They've always been there, right? But I'm your friend. I'm poor, and you judge me for being poor. I have been writing," and then Daisy says to Aza, "I have been writing fan fiction for 5 years, and I asked you multiple times to read it, and you wouldn't, to the point where I stopped asking you, right? And then only when your boyfriend asked you to read my fanfic did you, right? And then, which was incredibly selfish. And then she goes further. She's like, you don't know the name of my parents. You don't know the name of my pet. You don't know the name of my siblings. You don't know anything. You are incredibly self-absorbed. And one of the reasons you're so self-absorbed is because your crippling fear of these diseases you are using as a license, right? So this next part she insinuates. I think this is what John Green was saying. This blew my mind. This was the turnkey in the entire novel. Daisy says to Aza, "You are using in much longer words, but if you're paying attention, right? This is the whole of what she said. You're using your mental illness as a license for self-absorption." And I was like, "What? Wow!" And I've never heard that. Like, I've heard a million things about mental health issues, but like the idea that somebody could use a mental health issue as a license for further self-absorption, I was like, wow, that's kind of deep, man. And Daisy just like ripped into Aza. Aza is so stunned by all this because she kind of knew a lot of it was true, if not all of it was true, that she plows her Harold into a car in front of them, and the two of them are in a wreck. Harold is totaled. Aza is badly injured, and Daisy is okay. Okay? Daisy then goes and apologizes to her. Aza apologizes to Daisy, and Harold is totally wrecked, and she lost all the pictures on the camera, right? So really bad. Now, one of the things that gets crazier is Aza has continued to pay attention and investigate the mystery that Davis paid her to drop. Paid her $50,000 and paid her friends $50,000 to no longer pay attention to, right? So, so that's a problem, right? So one of the things is Daisy, because she's such a socialite, she is invited to a party, which is an underground art show, which is literally held in the tunnels of the city, right? And so it's like this super swank, not super swank, like super cool hipster art show, right? So they go into, by the way, this all happens in Indiana, right? So like, I can never remember if it's Cincinnati or Cleveland. It's one or the other. But so the city, they go into the city, they go into this tunnel underneath the city, and they're just experiencing this art show, and Aza and Daisy are there together. They have a great time. But then Aza says, hey, I need to get away from all these people. Let's walk down this super dark tunnel for a minute, right? And so they do, right? And then they smell this horrible, horrible thing. And the place where they're at is called Pogue's Run. And it links in Aza's mind, and she realizes that this is where Pickett, Davis's father, is actually at. And that what they're smelling is his body, right? She does not go to the police, goes straight to Davis and said, I solved the mystery. Your dad's dead I think your dad's dead in the sewers, right? Davis is like, what? And then Davis has to decide what to do. Davis's brother, Noah, is freaking out because his dad is not contacting them. And so Noah has been having all these troubles at school. And essentially, and then at the end, Davis has to decide what to do with this information. He gives the information to the police. They go and find his dead father, right? Which means that he now inherits nothing, right? And essentially, his brother is taken into a boarding school for troubled students. And Davis moves states away to remain with his brother Noah, breaking the relationship between Aza and Davis, right? But the relationship between Aza and Daisy remains strong, okay? So that's one of the reasons why I call this a slice of life, is there's romance throughout the book, but it ends up with them being split apart, right? And also, one of the reasons why they were split apart is throughout the entire book, Aza says, I'm not a good girlfriend, and you really shouldn't be a boyfriend to me because I'm not really functional, right? So I thought this was an absolutely fascinating look at mental health issues overall, and the characters were really compelling, and the story was really cool. I loved it, right? What's this got to do with the price of daggers in Faerun? Well, it's got a lot, right? So what can be ported out of John Green's Turtles All the Way Down directly into a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game? Well, I'm going to tell you what, right? So, one, I am a skilled veteran game master, and like half of the skilled veteran game masters on the planet, I am writing my own tabletop role-playing game. Now, that has been rejected by 6 publishers, and it is currently with the 7th publisher, and it's gotten farther with the 7th publisher than anybody else. I'm very excited. And we're even get to the point where there may be a signing discussion at this point. So, I'm very excited about this, right? But I'm going to show you one part of that tabletop role-playing game today. That entire thing could fall apart. Who knows, right? So getting anything published is incredibly difficult. This is just one step. I'm very excited about the progress, but it could fall apart overnight. So my whole point is, what I'm going to talk to you about right now is from my tabletop role-playing game, which is how I now pull items out for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Dungeon Mastering, which is clear, right? Catalyst, location, entity, artifact, relationships. So when I now experience a piece of art, I think about clear, and then I take each of those elements from clear and port them directly over into my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game, which is a custom world, Thracion. That's what I run in. And so here's the different things that can be taken out. So let's talk about Catalyst, right? So Catalyst and its entities are your non-player characters. Catalyst would be a named player character. Entity would generally be a non-player character, a non-named NPC, okay? So the Catalyst here is Aza, okay? What can you do with your NPCs in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition that is really interesting, that comes directly out of John Green's Turtles All the Way Down? Well, you can have your NPCs do things that are completely against their self-interest repeatedly, right? So one of the things is of course, people who are normally afraid of germs will go like this, rub their hands, and they'll use that cleansing lotion, that alcohol-based sanitizer, right? Well, Aza drinks this on the regular, puts it in her mouth and drinks it, which is a terrible idea, right? But it shows you how deeply she fears getting these diseases, right? So, and also, she has a super nice boyfriend who really likes her, pushes him away constantly. She has this really good friend who really loves her, super self-absorbed, does not care one inkling about anything that girl has to do, Daisy has to do. She, like, Aza does virtually nothing except do things that do not actually help her in any way, right? She's incredibly self-destructive. But she's also a compelling character, right? And so basically, you can think about this when you're creating your NPCs, that not NPCs don't always do the things that actually help them. Sometimes they do things that are completely against their own self-interest. And this flips logic, right? And often when we're thinking about our NPCs, we just play them like they would go logically. Not all human beings are logical. And this is a big new understanding, because, like, there's a dude who just won the Nobel Peace Prize who's talking about economics and saying, we have built our entire economic models on the fact that human beings are rational, and tons of times they're not, right? So, like, this is a really big revelation. This should be sitting in the center of our Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition games, and it is sitting in the center of a John Green YA slice of life novel, and it can be ported directly over into 5th edition. All right, let's talk about locations, right? Pogue's Run, where Pickett's body was found, right? What Davis's billionaire father did was, when he was found out and all of his shenanigans were, exposed, he went into Pogue's Run, into this tunnel that he was building with his own company, right? And he just hid himself in these tunnels in the middle of winter and died of exposure, right? Now, the reason he was able to do that was he was the creator of the tunnels. His company was building them, right? And we should remember this with locations. Creators of locations have access and knowledge of locations that no one else does. And this is really critical to understand. Okay? All right, let's talk about clear entities. All right. So, basically, a non-named character in the book actually invited Daisy to this underground art show, right? This entity exposed something, right? The mystery was solved when they went to this really unusual location. But earlier in the book, Davis paid Aza and Daisy not to solve the mystery. This is brilliant. So, what you want to do is present a mystery in your Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, right? Characters start making motions to solve it. Then someone comes along and says, listen, here's a whole bunch of gold. Shut this down. Move on. Go. Oh, by the way, there's some crisis over here in this other town. Here's 10,000 gold pieces. Shut this down. Move on, right? Now, your player characters, for the first time ever, have been given, the treasure they would have gotten at the end of the solving the mystery, and doing the quest. They would have gotten this later, but now they're getting it right away, right? And then, just like they do in Turtles All the Way Down, you then give them clues that almost fully solve the mystery after they've been paid not to solve it. This is very dramatic, right? I've never done that in any of my Dungeons & Dragons games. That's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. All right, I am a skilled veteran dungeon master, right? I cannot run a 26th game where I started in a tavern, right? Turtles, all the ideas, all the catalysts, all the locations, all the entities, all the artifacts items, all the relationships in Turtles All the Way Down, nobody in my Dungeons & Dragons group is going to know them. Get your ideas for adventures from places that none of your players are reading. And don't tell them your source, okay? All right. So I love that idea of paying somebody to solve a mystery, paying somebody to not solve a mystery, and then giving them the clues to solve it. And now they have a real choice, right? All right. So also artifacts. Let's talk about artifacts. The importance of Harold, right? So this old Toyota Corolla was incredibly valuable to Aza, right? Well, let's say you have a paladin NPC, right? Let's say he pays incredible attention to his warhorse and is always making sure it has apples and always brushes it before, he puts it up in the stables and just cares so much about this destrier warhorse, right? And people would think, oh, he cares about that horse because it's functional and it helps him do what he needs to do, right? And it's how he gets around the world. But his actual love for that creature, his care for that creature, his incredible appreciation of that creature, and the value he puts on that creature could come because that's the destrier that his brother was slain upon and got an arrow through his heart and fell off and died in a field, and this paladin was only 8 years old and saw it from the top of a hill, you know what I mean? So sometimes when people care about their mode of transportation, that might be connected to something other than it being functional, okay? Last is relationships. And I think this is really the heart of this book, and this is incredibly important to port over into our Dungeons & Dragons games. I think friendship is something, Backgrounds has attempted to kind of give mechanics to the social aspects of our characters, but I feel like we're at the very beginning of this process, and friendship really hasn't been delved into in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition enough. Aza and Daisy. Daisy defines the value of Aza. Aza is a monstrous human being. She was so incredibly self-absorbed, so incredibly self-destructive, so incredibly selfish, right? The fact that she never read Daisy's fan fiction, the smallest thing that her friend cared so much about, and she couldn't look up from her own worries and from her own concerns and from her own privileges and her own comforts long enough to do that one thing for her. The fact that she ignored this friend who cared about her so much, she was a monster human being, right? But we know that she has value because Daisy loves her, and Daisy is a nice person and a good person and a valuable human being, right? And she gives value to Aza, in my opinion. And that's one of the things is we can show characters, non-player characters, basically there's so many things to be learned from this. One, sometimes the value of a person is only really shown when another person loves that person, right? Like, and it highlights all the things that are good about this person, and like Aza was interesting, and Aza had value as a human being, right? And Daisy knew that, right? Even when, to anybody else, Aza just looks like a monster human being, in my opinion. Like a pure monster. The other thing is, how does someone who loves a monster do that? They do it through sacrifice and patience. And that's what you learn through the relationship portion of Aza and Daisy, right? So this can really add depth to our NPCs in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I love this book, and I think that John Green's Turtles All the Way Down is a treasure trove of elements and hooks and adventure ideas and non-player character ideas and item ideas and how humanity works so that we can understand NPCs better, and also a pretty interesting look at the idea of mental health and that our NPCs, not all of them are going to be mentally healthy. Sometimes there will be mental illness there, and this shows us a way that we can reflect that. And so that is my bringing out the clear, the catalysts, the locations, the entities, the artifacts, and the relationships from John Green's Trolls All the Way Down, ready to port directly into Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Thank you very much for listening through this. I know this was a long one. Please consider liking and subscribing. Take care.